Good morning, artist Charles Wolf here, back again for another full-length painting video. We're going to start out today with a 8x10 canvas board, just a white basic canvas board. I'm also going to be using acrylic paints today, and you will need the following colors: cobalt blue, titanium white, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow medium, and I think that's all of them. Alizarin crimson, of course. I can't forget that. One of my favorite colors. Alizarin crimson, make sure you have that. I'll be using a number 10 bright brush as well as a number 8 filbert brush as we go along. I think I also use a palette knife at one point during this video, so have that handy. Okay, I think that's all we need to tell you to get started, so let's just get right to painting. Alright, we're going to start with our number 10 bright brush, and then we're going to be putting onto the canvas some Mars black as well as some titanium white and a mixture of the two. I want a very dark, stormy, energetic sky today, so there's going to be lots of diagonal strokes, allowing the brush to move around fairly freely. I'm not trying to control my movements too much. I just want it to be very active, the brush strokes to be fresh and loose and very active overall. We want it to be a energetic, like I said, frenzied sort of sky, so we're going to create that effect with quick little gestures of our own with the brushwork. I'm moving very quickly here because I don't want it to be too thought out or planned. I just want to fill it in and throw it on there really fast to get painting on the little bit trickier stuff like the mountains we're going to do as well as the trees. I should mention, by the way, that this is not an abstract, but a more traditional style landscape. I was just in the mood, and I'm going to be doing a bunch of these little tiny canvases to sell at some point when I go to the conference that I'm planning on attending in July. So I need to get on painting more of these little canvases, these little canvas boards here. Doing traditional paintings might do a little bit better, especially on the smaller size. If I was doing the larger size, you know, the very large 40 by 40 canvases, then of course I like doing abstracts on a much larger scale. But the abstracts on this very tiny scale can be okay, but I don't think they translate as well. You need more space to really get it to be interesting, I think. So here for these smaller little canvases, I typically will do the traditional approach, traditional landscape, what you would expect from a painter, I think. I'm going to bring in some lighter gray here. There is some black in there, but it's a lot of white, more white than black. And I'm trying to have some movement, and I'm making sure that I'm leaving areas of dark and areas of light. I want these clouds to sort of be swirling and amassing above these mountains I'm going to put in. I'm also thinking about proportions. And I think today I really want the sky to be a dominant part of this painting, so I'm going to allow it to cake up actually 2/3 of my little canvas here. That's a lot of space I'm just dedicating to the sky. Like I said, I really want it to be the main part of this. I'm going to switch over to a mixture of alizarin crimson and cobalt blue. I've also switched to my filbert brush to lay this in. As I move that blue upward, it's going to hit some of the white, and that is going to lighten it up. As mountains get farther away from you, you'll notice that they get more blue, and they also get lighter in tone, a little bit more washed out because of the atmosphere between you. So I'm going to mimic that by allowing the white and the light blue to kind of mingle together with the sky. It also will help me kind of show that there's more light in the far distance, and yet the stormy clouds at the very top of the canvas are closest to us, and that's going to kind of affect my foreground quite a bit. Okay, putting in some alizarin crimson, and I'm going to go back and forth trying to balance out darker areas with lighter areas. Overall, my idea for this is that the light source is kind of to my left. The sun is over on the left-hand side of the painting, maybe slightly behind me. So anything facing kind of behind me out to the left is going to be lighter. So any highlights I want to put on these mountains, they need to be going that way, to the left. Now anything that's facing the opposite way, like more to my right-hand side, like you can see some of these mountain shapes are facing more to the right, I'm going to put in my darker shadow colors on those sides because I want there to be a balance of lights and darks, and I want this to have a three-dimensional look. I don't want it to be too flat and static. I've made the artistic decision that I want to vary my mountains with the red. So anything that I think should be kind of highlighted and sort of pop forward, I'm going to be using that red to do that effect. Is that realistic? Well, maybe not. Maybe I'm being a little bit artistic with it and a little bit free with it. But that's okay. It is a painting and it is a creative work. And so we don't always have to be 100% realistic with everything that we do. If we're mostly realistic with it, but then have a few, little changes here, pushing some colors here and there, it actually can be more dramatic and much more interesting overall. I for one, am not feeling like I need to be super realistic with my colors in this piece. I want to have fun, and I want it to be interesting for me as an artist. So to do that, I'm going to be allowing myself to push certain colors beyond what you would normally expect to see. These mountains are coming in very nicely. I'm probably going to cover up some of them on the right hand side a bit more, and I might even add a few more in as we go along here. At first I thought, well, maybe I'll do a very, very far away tree line, something right along the bottom of these. But as I started working on it, I decided no, I want to bring in the right hand side much closer to me and then have it kind of go receding much farther into the distance. So you can even see right here with this darker I think it is a bit of burnt umber. I'm not sure if I mentioned that color at the beginning. I should have. Burnt umber as well. It's a burnt umber, maybe a little bit of cadmium yellow medium, just a touch of it, and maybe a little bit of the Mars black all together as sort of a base color for my trees. I'm going to go over this with some lighter pops of yellows and reds and oranges of the fall foliage, like I think I might have mentioned, over top of this darker color. But before you can see the light, you have to have some dark on the canvas. So always put your dark down first. Typically you should do that, and then go over it with the light highlights and the bright pops of the color. It'll just look a lot better, and it'll make it look a little bit more realistic overall. Alright, coming along very nicely here. Everything's going very well. Now with this painting, there's always a certain amount of playing and balancing, and I didn't really plan this out too much, other than thinking I want a stormy sky, mountains, and some trees, and maybe a lake. So I had the basic idea and I had the basic composition in my head, but I didn't know exactly where the trees were going to be precisely. And you can kind of tell, because what I end up having to do is I'm going to paint this out, all these highlights in, and then unfortunately I look at it and I realize that I have a problem. It's a little bit too horizontal, meaning that all the trees are kind of about the same height and it's just going from right to left, and that's very static, and I want more depth and motion in my piece. And by motion I mean not literal motion, but more the viewer's eye moving across the canvas, and so the motion of the viewer's eye needs to move, and I have to direct that with my depth and with my perspective. So because my trees are too static, they're all the same size, kind of going across more or less, I realized that I needed to lower the height on one side. So I chose the left-hand side are going to be a lot lower and lots farther away, a lot smaller, I should say. And the right-hand side are going to be much bigger trees, meaning they're closer to you. As things get farther in the distance, of course, they get smaller looking. As things get closer to you, they're going to be a lot bigger. Bear with me as I work through this, because I need to have one side bigger than the other. And it took me a little bit to figure that out. I just sort of forgot about that while I was painting, and that's okay. That's one of the beauties and the best thing about painting. That's something that I really, really enjoy and absolutely love about it. It's so forgiving. If you make a mistake, you always can let it dry, especially if you're using acrylics like I am here. They dry so fast. Just take a hairdryer, dry it off, or take a towel and dab some of it off. It's okay. You can go back, add a little bit more of the dark color or some more light color, and let it dry, paint right over it, no big deal, keep going. I'm not even having to really even do that much. I actually just worked on some other spots, and then, 2 or 3 minutes later I went back and just painted right over it. There's a tendency it could turn into mud, so you have to be careful when you do that, but it worked out, and it really helped me get a much more dynamic and interesting painting in the end. Be aware with acrylics, they tend to dry a little bit darker than when you first put them on. So when you're painting, and I've discovered as I've been painting, I need to be a bit lighter than I really want to be, because as it dries, it will darken up. Some of the darker tones will start to saturate some of the lighter tones, and it just sort of the process that you have to realize is that you want to paint a little bit lighter, especially for these acrylics. Now, the very, very top line acrylics, I'm not using top line acrylics here. I'm just using some very basic acrylics. Midline, not super cheap and not super expensive either. If you were using the really, really nice ones, then they may not do that. They may hold their color a little bit better. But for when you're using, if you're a beginner painter and you're using some just cheap basic acrylics, just be aware of that. At least that's what I found for these that I'm using. It works pretty well. It does what I want to do. The colors seem to be vibrant enough. And for my style of painting, it works fairly well. If you do a very detailed, realistic paintings, then you may want to find a different brand. I don't know what style of painting you like to do. But for me, because I do lots of big abstracts, or I try to at least, I need cheaper acrylic paint just because I'm going to use so much of it. And I don't want to break the bank on every single painting that I do. So adding a little bit of the blue here. Now this is kind of a cool technique. I actually really like playing board games. It's one of my other hobbies when I'm not painting or playing music or doing anything creative like that. Or even working on my blog. If you have a chance, you should check it out. It's impulsiveartistry.blogspot.com. I have lots of creative things on there, paintings and articles about being creative, and guest artist features from around the world, people sharing their art. I like actually painting little miniature figures for board games. Sometimes there's little minis that you have to use in different games. You move them around the board, and it's very nice sometimes just to paint them. And so I'll take some acrylic paint, and I will work on painting my figures. Well, one of the techniques you see in there is called dry brushing. And what you do is take a little bit of the paint, just a tiny bit, put it onto the brush. Then you take, and I use like a piece of cardboard, and then I'll wipe most of the paint off. And then I'll very lightly kind of do a glaze effect over top of the other colors. So that's what I did in the sky with the blue. I just put a little blue on the brush, wiped most of it off, and then with just a very little bit that was left on the brush, I did the sky. I should note here that I am editing these videos quite a bit, in that I'm cutting out any spot where I'm reloading my brush. I'm just trying to save time and make them a little bit quicker. They are full length, and they're all at fairly normal speed. I don't try to speed them up very much at all if I can help it. Just trying to keep the length around 20 minutes. I don't try to be longer than that. So I may speed it up a little bit in a few spots, but overall it's at normal speed. This is my normal speed of painting. I do edit these quite a bit, so that's why this one took me a little bit longer to edit together. There's a lot of little details and a lot of changing colors of the brush and a lot of reloading things. So all in all, this actual painting took me about an hour and 20 minutes to create, and I cut it down to 20 minutes in length. But you're not missing any of the actual painting. All of it is in here. me putting paint on the canvas, all of that is in this video. You're not missing anything like that. It's just the stuff that happens off camera, and the pauses, and the me walking around in circles looking at the painting. That's all cut out. You don't want to watch that anyways. How boring is that? So it may seem like I'm making lots of decisions really quickly, and I am, but it's not quite real time that way. Well, that was a bit of a rabbit trail. It happens, you know. Okay, let's get back on track and talk about the painting. I'm using some green here that I've created, mixing some cadmium yellow medium plus some cobalt blue. I've added a little bit more of the cadmium yellow medium on top of this color in just a moment, and I'm trying to fill in this right-hand foreground. Now, what will that do for me? Well, it'll create more depth in my painting, adding another layer to it, and I have found that the more layers you can have in your paintings, the more planes that come in, you can push your viewer farther and farther away and make it seem like it's a much deeper and dynamic painting. So adding more layers is a really, really good idea and a great thing to do. Okay, I'm bringing in a little bit of the darker green. I've just muddied it up with a little bit of brown and a touch of the Mars black. And I've also put in a little bit more of the cadmium yellow medium there on top, and that's going to brighten it up. I'm actually going to change that right-hand color, not from green. Yeah, I keep changing everything, I know. I will pick something, I promise. Just give me a moment. And I'm going to change it to a sandy beach, so it'll be more of a lighter brown. And I'm going to add some foreground rocks. I'm super excited about these rocks because it's going to add another element to my painting. They're going to be large, hulking rocks that are sitting in the sunlight and just that's breaking through the clouds, of course. And it's going to be pull the viewer further back again, another plane that I'm adding to it. A little bit of alizarin crimson on the right-hand side there, and in the far back mountain I added some blue. I'm starting to push down those left-hand trees, and I'm going to pull forward my right-hand trees just a bit so that I have more of a contrast between the left-hand side of the painting to the right-hand side, which is going to be presumably a bit closer. Now, I could have left this green like I have it, and it would look just fine, but I thought the mood of the painting, especially with that purple, just didn't quite fit. To make that orange, I'm actually mixing the alizarin crimson with the cadmium yellow medium, just so you know. I think I might also be using a bit, if I remember correctly, some cadmium orange hue. I think I have some of that as well. Man, I've got two colors in my intro. I'm going to have to go back there and redo it maybe. I do have some good news though. I think that orange is the orange I stick with, and I'm going to bring it, like I said, very low down, kind of distant on the left-hand side. It's going to be much, much further back. This is the breakthrough for this piece for me. Every piece I think that painting that I do has a breakthrough moment where the thing just starts to come together and I get a clear image and vision for what I want with this piece. And this was my moment. As soon as I put that cadmium yellow medium on the far left-hand side, and I had that beautiful depth occur as the trees went from a little bit fatter on the left, getting very, very tiny in the middle, and then much closer on the right-hand side. The painting snapped together. It just looked so great. I was so excited. I'm going to be putting in some very dark brown, brownish green, kind of a muddy color there on the right-hand side. It does look like I'm mixing mud a little bit. I'm going to clean that up a bit as I go along. So bear with me again, but it's starting to come together. I'm getting a very clear idea of what I want this painting to look like, and that's exciting for me as an artist. The whole point of painting is to explore, is to see what you can do, and to explore not only yourself, but also the colors, the texture, the medium as a whole. And in this piece, I'm doing lots and lots of experimentation. Now, I had thought about putting these trees much, much closer, and indeed I'm putting them a lot closer to us and sort of varying the colors again, but not quite as dramatically as I had them before. But as I go along, I do change it a little bit when I put in the banks of the river, and it's going to get a little bit sandier. There we go. You can see that tree line is starting to connect way back there in the distance, and that breakthrough that you can see. Finally, this painting looks the way I want it to. Yes, some would argue that you should plan it all out first, but to me that really kills some of the joy I get out of painting, because then everything is already planned and figured out. I love throwing some paint and making little changes and discovery. Is that not the most efficient use of time? Well, probably not, but this is sort of how I work, and this is how I've always loved to work. So I'm a little loath to get too too analytical on it. I want painting. I think it's sort of a hobby for me at this point. I mean, I do sell them professionally, and I'm working on growing that aspect of selling my paintings online. If you'd like to buy some of my paintings and support me as an artist, you can buy them on Etsy at my Etsy shop. You just need to go to etsy.com/shop/impulsive artistry, and you can find my work there. There is that brownish yellow color that's going to become the sandy shore that I was talking about to you earlier. And I am just defining this outer edge of where the water is starting and where this beach area is also starting. Now I'm going to use the point of my knife, and I was just thinking about taking this point of my knife and actually cutting in the rocks, but it just didn't look quite right. So once I realized that, I said, okay, well, I'm not going to cut them in with my knife and show the canvas. I'm going to actually put some white paint here. I went for it. Now, I put the white paint on fairly generously, maybe a little bit too generously, so be aware of that. I'm going to back it off, and actually, at the very end of this painting, I did the last few little touches off camera, and I pulled back on the white a little bit. So when you first see it, it's kind of a smack in the face, all that white. Don't worry, I do correct for it. Again, remember that acrylics tend to dry a bit darker, so it may be okay to go and put it on a very bright color, because it will, as the colors settle together and the darker ones sort of saturate the lighter ones, it will settle down a bit and it won't be quite so dramatic and clashing as it may look to you now. Okay, there's that white. Now it's almost pure titanium white. I don't usually recommend putting so much white into a painting, but if you have a strong enough composition, meaning you didn't use a lot of white beforehand, and you have a lot of rich, pure colors, a little bit of white like this can actually look really good. So this is pure white first. I'm just sort of getting it in and figuring out where I'm laying these rocks. And then I'm going to go back, of course, and add a darker bluey gray here and create some shadow colors. Here's that bluey gray I was talking about. I think it's coming in here nicely, and it's going to contrast. I may push it to a darker gray eventually. It wasn't contrasting enough for my taste, but those rocks in the foreground are going to help pull this whole piece together. Yeah, this is exciting, I have to say. This is exciting. This piece is now really starting to click, starting to come together. One of the things that I noticed about this piece is that the water is a bit dark, and I actually was able to catch that and to make a last minute change. And I used a little bit of that dry brush technique, the same technique that I used for the blue in the sky. And I took that dry brush technique and used a little bit of a light gray. And I just very lightly, whisper feather touch lightly across the bottom of the canvas and lightened up that water that's closest to us, kind of receding. So the farther away it is, a little bit darker, but the nearer stuff is a little bit lighter. And it looks really good, and that was the touch I needed. Bringing in a little bit here of some lighter greens and yellows of some grasses poking through the rocks. I'm going to get rid of a few of these that go a little bit over the top. I typically go a little bit over the top, so I'm going to back off a little bit and make some adjustments. Taking some of that grayish color that I have on my brush, and I'm going to help sort of put in some of this rocky shore here and push back those trees a little bit. There's that sandy shore I was talking about. Like I told you, it was kind of a light gray, like a light brown, because the yellow and the green kind of hit the blue, and that turned to kind of a grayed out brownish color. I'm not exactly sure how I got there. It just sort of happened, and I said, that's a good color for the shore. Put it there. You know, that sometimes happens. Sometimes you mix colors, and it just works out. Sometimes it's good to know exactly how you did it, but in this case, I just went with it, because I thought, hey, that's a good color, I'll put that back there. And it pulls the background into the foreground. Because sometimes it's a good idea to put some of the colors that you see in the foreground into the background, and that will help tie the whole thing together. It's a neat little trick that I've seen other people do, and I thought, hey, good spot for it right here. Now, I did bring back some of that alizarin crimson, and I'm going to put a little bit of alizarin crimson in a few spots to sort of break up that back tree line. I don't want it to be pure yellow all the way across, so a few pops of the red will really go a long way. And I'm going to reflect them, of course, into the water, just pulling straight down. Alright, well, we're nearly done with this painting. If you'd like to see more of my work, you can check it out at my blog. That's impulsiveartistry.blogspot.com. Let me say that again. It's impulsiveartistry.blogspot.com. should check it out. It's a really neat blog that has painting videos, that has some of my other artwork where I talk about in article form about my paintings. You can see all of my paintings in my painting gallery, and that's at the very top left-hand tab on my blog. Once you get on there, you'll see what I'm talking about. So if you would, just take a moment and head over to the blog. I'll have it linked below in the description. I really appreciate it.